pretty happy to finally meet. I think we met through small bets a while back. And yeah, you were like launching your newsletter, and I think off of the back of that, once you had some traction, that's when you released your book, right?
Yeah,
So yeah, pretty excited to get into this conversation and maybe as a starter, because I'm pretty curious, but I know that for myself, for example, I was, making a few small courses, like one of those small bets. And eventually, you quickly realize like you can't just make a living off of very small info products or anything like that. And in the end, it's mostly about really starting a relationship. So I'm curious for you and your book, like how has it been? Like, did you get some nice conversation, partnerships, maybe clients off of that? I know it's been quite recent, but I'm curious to see how you see that. What's your perspective on that?
yes. First of all, very good to meet you, Kenny. Yes, we met through small bets some times ago, actually, maybe
Yeah,
more than a year ago. Yeah, at the time I had just launched
yeah.
my newsletter, Consulting Intel, and yeah, as you said, that got some traction. Now I have, yeah, maybe a few thousand subscribers globally from, I want to say, 130 countries, which is, wild to
Oh,
think
wow.
that, yeah, whatever I write is read in 130 countries across the world. But yeah, then at some point there was this urge to write in the book. For me, writing has always been part of my day. It's something
Uh-huh.
that I particularly enjoy. I always did it since I was a kid, really. When I was in
Nice.
Italy, actually, I used to write a blog in the early 2000s when I was at uni, and that blog was pretty popular in Italy. And
Cool.
then after I left university, I abandoned it, and now it disappeared. But it's not my first experience writing online. Of course, consulting intel is very focused on what I do, which is
Hmm.
essentially consulting and that aspect of professional services. The book was a natural continuation. I wrote it. It took me a couple of years because life gets pretty busy with a full-time job, family, kid, and everything.
Yeah, I know.
But the book was very interesting. It was a good process for me. It was a very first time I'm writing a book. I'm pretty sure it's not gonna be the last time I write a book because I
Nice.
really enjoy the process. And as you said, it gave me the opportunity to get out there and get my some of my thoughts out there, which are perhaps a bit unconventional and not what everyone would tell to a young
Hmm.
consultant starting their career. And yes, it allows me to have a lot of fun conversations with people like yourself and many more that I actually did not envision when I published the book. I didn't think it would become even this small popularity that it's getting now. I didn't think this would happen, and but I'm very happy that it happened, and it's good to connect with people with shared interests everywhere.
Yeah, in the end, I think that that's probably the main. I know you get like on the bestseller in Amazon and things like that, which is pretty cool. But the main goal, or at least the main result, is you're really having more conversations with more people, right? Because of that book, and then getting probably some new ideas off of the back of it. Um,
Yes, yes, it was incredibly. It was a surprise for me. I became a number one bestseller in US, in UK, in Australia, and in Italy.
oh wow,
And I was like, wow, how is it even
yeah.
possible? Yeah, people like it. People are liking the book. Uh, as I said, I'm meeting a lot of cool people. Tom Goodwin agreed to write the foreword for the book. I actually met him yesterday. He's here in Sydney for a conference, and it's
That's cool.
amazing. Like it's just the power of serendipity online.
Yeah, I love it. That's what I love about the internet. I'm curious, how, because I know you've been talking about AI and I know you use it. Like, ha have you been using it for your book or, maybe to structure your thoughts, notes, and things like that? Yeah, how do you use that tool for to speed up that process, maybe?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm an very heavy user of ChatGPT in general.
Yeah.
It's too hard now for me to switch to any other model, even if perhaps ChatGPT is not really the best out there right now. I started using it very early.
Hmm.
At least I started experimenting with it. For the book, I followed a different process in the sense that I already had a lot of material written
Yeah.
from many years, like pre ChatGPT. So
Hmm.
I had this material there, and I structured it in a very simple Google Docs to start with. And then I also had an editor. So I had a guy from
Oh, that's cool.
India who was a reader of my newsletter, and he reached out and he knew that I was in the process of writing the book, and he offered to help. He is a professional editor, and so yeah, I worked with him for that. I used ChatGPT here and there, but not so heavily,
Mm.
mainly because I already had a lot of material
Yeah.
written from previous years. But I do use ChatGPT
Okay.
daily. I use it for work. I use it for personal stuff. It helps
Hmm.
me. I use it as a sparring partner with
Yeah.
ideas and concepts and explorations, and it's good. I don't know, obviously it has some limitations, especially when you go out of the text, you go into images and designs and creative
Yeah.
work. I think it shows important limitations,
Hmm.
but if you know the boundaries, I think it's a good tool, and for sure it'll be very helpful in the future as well.
Yeah, for sure. Well, maybe that's what I'm curious to hear about from you regarding the limitations because there's a lot, of noise and I think for good reasons, right? Like I think when people say it's overhyped, I'm like, yeah, but it's the return on investment that you can get sometimes is just wild, like things that could make like I don't know, you would spend 2 hours doing something and that maybe takes you like 10 minutes or something like that, and you're just way more high level on some of the tasks that you use. But there's still a lot of, you know, over exaggeration. So, and obviously, it's shaping, there's a bit of fear mongering and people are kind of scared about what's going to happen to them and things like that. So there is a lot of things going on currently. So I'm just on your side. Yeah, what's your perspective on all that stuff and just everything that's going on currently and what everyone's talking about?
I think there is, of course, a lot of hype, and there has been for quite some time, but
Yeah,
this is nothing new in the sense when
yeah,
there is a new technology wave, it's always like that. People get onto it, they discover an entire new world of possibilities. And especially now with social media pushing narratives left and right, it becomes very hard to distinguish the signal from the noise. I
yeah.
think for me the way to go about it is to experiment. Do your
Hmm.
experiments, see what's working for you and what might not work for you, and at least try to imagine the possibilities. I think, uh, and I think this perspective is grounded in history. I think it's very hard for us to understand and predict now how
Hmm.
a specific tool will evolve in the future and what's going to happen to us in 10 years or in 20 years, and how this technology tool will change our world. I think we are
Hmm.
particularly bad at this, and again, historically we have been very bad at this, because I don't think anybody would have ever imagined that we would have this in the 50s. Nobody would have thought we could have this conversation from miles and miles
Hmm.
away and speaking like in near real time. So I always have a bit of skepticism when somebody tells me, "Oh, this is exactly what's gonna happen." How do you know? I have a nice
Yeah.
story, right? That I like, that I like to say. I am 41. So my grandfather was born in 1921. So
Hmm.
when he was 41 in 1962, imagine, right? You tell my grandfather that my daughter will be his great granddaughter would sit and learn piano on a screen that she would tap with her finger, or that we could have this
Yeah.
conversation, or that we could speak with a computer. These sorts of things were not very predictable at the time, and so I think that what's going to happen in the next 20 years, we can see the direction, but we can't really predict with precision. And so it's very
Yeah.
important that we are in the middle of the change, that we learn what's happening, we learn
Hmm.
how to unlearn, how to relearn, and we keep reinventing ourselves. This is something, as a principle, that I really believe in. I try to do it every day, because it's gonna become harder and harder to keep the pace of technology advancement.
Yeah, I find it's quite funny when you look at representations of, yeah, maybe like 60, 50, or even, during the industrial age when people try to imagine the future of like random cars with wings and stuff like that. And I guess it's kind of like the equivalent right now, right? We're just trying to imagine stuff that's probably completely distorted by our current understanding of it. And later on, as we do more experiments, we have a better understanding of which use cases we can tackle with the technology. But yeah, until then, I feel like I guess we have very short window where we can really be like, okay, what's potentially going to happen, but I guess you can't really go super far um, in terms of where everything is going to go, right?
Yeah, I think there is the use case identification problem. That's
Hmm.
one, let's say, one topic. The other subject is the timeline. How long is gonna take?
Yeah.
um, I see on Twitter or everywhere online, people, we are gonna lose all our jobs in the next 18 months. 50% of people will lose their job. It's just nonsensical, right? It's absolute nonsense. Um, if you look at big enterprises, I like that you can vibe code your nice piece of software on your laptop in a weekend, and that's good.
Hmm.
But and probably you like it, and it's very helpful for you.
Yeah.
But that's nowhere near commercial viability. You can't sell that stuff,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So if you want to sell it, you have to obviously improve it, make it secure, perhaps make it legal. I don't even know if that thing that you built it's legal. How are you
Hmm.
treating privacy and all of that? So from a weekend we go into something a bit bigger. Now, if you translate that into an enterprise, for example, point of view, that same application might take months, but not
Yeah.
because the technology challenges. It's because the regulations, the internal guardrails that you have in enterprises, the fact that you need to go through different departments to approve a change. And of course, we can think of a future where that process is made smoother by AI or whatnot,
Hmm.
but it's not going to happen within 18 months. Remember that big enterprises are still going through what they call digital transformation.
Yeah, true.
So, so it started 15 years ago. Uh,
Yeah.
they're not done with it. There are companies actually that have stuff on premise. They have the server on premise. They
Hmm.
don't even move to the cloud
Yeah.
yet. Maybe they're never gonna move to the cloud now. Maybe they are, they skipped completely that part of the technology shift. So it's hard to predict. It's gonna take
Hmm.
longer than you think, and if you are curious and in the middle of the technology change, I think you'll find a way to make
Yeah.
yourself relevant. You have to be intentional about it.
Yeah, I mean that's what I see as well. Like the spreadsheet is still a very widespread technology, right? There's a lot of companies that just don't even use a software like you were saying that's on cloud or anything like that. So yeah, it's just missing the point of there's just a lot of inertia in terms of when dealing with humans, right? You can probably develop the technology, but then there's like everything that goes around it in the end that you still need to tackle, and it's super messy and way harder to navigate than just vibe coding something or just like, very predictable program.
Absolutely. The technology is always the easy bit. Then there
Yeah.
is a human behavior. There are incentives. There are habits. There is
Yeah.
governance. There are regulations. Very important.
Hmm.
People tend to forget about it. Yeah, you can push the boundaries, but again, in a large enterprise, especially in industries which are heavily regulated. I happen to work in banking,
Yeah.
and financial services is a heavily regulated industry. You can't just vibe code your way through a new app.
Yeah.
So you need to be more careful. It takes a bit longer time. The reputational risk for enterprises is massive. And so the technology becomes the easy bit, but everything else around the technology becomes
Hmm.
the challenge and the obstacle and what you need to work on. And it takes time.
So that's a good jumping point. How I'm curious, like around you, and what's the sentiment around AI? Like, the executive that you hang out with. Um, is it like excitement, skepticism, prudence? What kind of like do you sense around you? Yeah.
It's a bit of everything, really. But I think we also went full circle on this. If I look at like maybe 2 years ago when ChatGPT or this Gen AI wave came out, became quite popular, I think a lot of executives were like, oh, that's just hype.
Yeah.
It's just another thing. It will go away. And so there was no really a lot of attention at that point. Then I think that there was some adoption happening, and
Hmm.
and therefore the benefits of this technology started to become a bit more apparent, and
Yeah.
also I think the narratives were a bit more heavily pushed, and so executives were like, oh yeah, I want a bit of AI, give me some AI, let's find something to do with AI.
Hmm.
Now it's more okay. Let's identify the right use cases where AI can actually help my business reach the goals that I need to reach, rather
Hmm.
than just do AI just for the sake of it. And
Hmm.
so there is a lot of attention in understanding the benefits of AI. A lot of companies are looking at productivity improvements only,
Hmm.
which is a way of looking at that, but it's not the only way. I think there is also an angle that you can take with AI, which is around using the technology to recreate a different business model completely. Instead of doing incremental improvements,
Oh,
improving
I see. Yeah.
productivity of like 5%, 10%, try to redesign the whole thing, uh,
Hmm.
being AI first. Of course, the larger the company, the harder this is because you have many more friction points. But if you have the opportunity to start fresh, or even if you have like a company within a company, I think that's a massive opportunity for incumbents as well to relook at the way they do business.
Yeah, I see. Instead of, yeah, because I guess lots of people look at like, here's my existing workflow, might take like X amount of time. Here's the accuracy in terms of when we tackle the process. But what you're saying is just going way more strategic and infuse it. Like, how can you use the technology just from the get-go to
Yes.
either deliver value faster or cheaper um, than before? That's like, yeah.
Yes, I mean, if I let's take your example of the workflow. Likely, this process was invented 40 years ago because at the end the industries were there already 40 years ago, right? So then
Yeah.
slowly, you add layers of technology on top. The process gets probably more complicated year on year.
Hmm.
Technologies try to simplify the process. Maybe you went through a few rounds of process simplification, maybe not. So maybe the process is still a mess and it still includes a bunch of steps that you don't actually need. So now you have a technology that could uh, really fundamentally change, right, the way you operate this process. So why are you sticking
Hmm.
to it?
Yeah.
Why are you trying to look for the 10% improvement when you could possibly get 90% improvement by completely redesigning the process and starting AI natively, AI first. Again, why? I know why. In a big company, it's very hard
Yeah.
to completely get rid of what you have done for the last 40 years and start fresh. But if you are not in a big company, or maybe you are in an enterprise that is willing to take a bit of risk in specific areas of the business, that's possibly something that you could attempt. And I think it's a much more effective use of the technology.
Yeah, which is exciting. If you have the opportunity, definitely that's a fun one. So I'm curious, like, have you? I mean, I know it's quite recent, but what are kind of the early signs that you've seen, or maybe the big, signals that distinguish, successful integration of AI from, project that just doesn't work? I know there's been lots of, articles and reports about how, you know, there is no return on the investment, but I'm curious from your point of view, what do you see there?
Um, yeah, so in my experience, I've seen a lot of proof of concepts happening, a lot of prototyping,
Yeah.
and in a lot of cases, those prototypes didn't make it to production. They just stopped at lots of proof of concept
I see.
level. And I think um, probably the first thing that comes to mind is around ownership. Like, who owns this change? Is it business? Is it technology? Is this specific department? So there is a lot of turf war also in companies, in
I
organizations,
see. Yeah.
around ownership. So I think that's probably one big rock to tackle. The other thing is around the right use case. As I mentioned before, right, there is at the beginning there was a sort of a spray and pray approach. Let's do whatever we can. Just
Yeah.
let's use AI and see what happens.
Hmm.
And I think perhaps in that phase, not the right use cases were identified, and
Hmm.
therefore when you have a use case that doesn't deliver immediate business benefits, you probably did something wrong or
Hmm.
something suboptimal. So we are spending a lot of time now in identifying the use case that can bring the best business value, and that's where you can see the effectiveness of AI as a technology. Yeah, I think this is probably the big items. Probably something around complexity can be said as well, in the sense that there is always a tendency to go for complexity over simplicity, but instead maybe take the popular low hanging fruit, right? Just
Yeah.
attack that problem, show
Hmm.
some value, and then you build on there. So don't go for the complex stuff first,
Yeah.
but start simple.
I know you were chatting about, experimentation as a way to tackle, just separating signals from noise. But I've seen you also talk about, taking kind of a big picture approach. As in, you go back, okay, what happened like, 100 years from now, and what was the reactions of people then? So I wonder, do you have some sort of framework to kind of, use that as your analysis of what's going on right now and really make sense of all of that?
So in general, I am a consultant, so I like to operate and think in frameworks. So that's good in the sense it comes quite natural to me,
Yeah.
and I always try to look for the probably the less obvious explanation
Hmm.
around everything. So in the last few years, there is this popularity of the idea of first principles, right? Thinking in first principles,
Hmm.
which it's a popular idea now, but it's nothing new, really. Just
Yeah.
try to understand what's behind. In consulting, we have the five whys framework, right? Ask why 5 times to understand what's really behind the problem you think is the problem you're trying to solve, and maybe there is another one behind. So along those lines, I always try to uncover the second, third, fourth order explanation behind things. And that helps me in general because, first of all, it makes me think deeper about the subject. It makes me learn more because when I go through the second, third, and fourth, I probably realize I am missing something and I have to go and read and study and ask people. So I learn more. And I think the probability this gives me a better picture is higher. Just stopping at the surface level and read one article on LinkedIn and that's it. So I think this approach in general, I think works, and that's, to be fair, it's natural for me in the sense I didn't have to learn it. Maybe if it doesn't come natural to you, there is a bit of friction in your habits. But as long as you are a curious person and you have that healthy dose of skepticism and your your bullshit detector is pretty tuned, I think it can work.
Yeah. Yeah, but what I'm hearing from you is it's a combination of skepticism and curiosity as well, right? It's like, oh, someone's telling me something, but what's really behind that? And then trying to dig deeper in the claim and seeing what's true about it, what's not true maybe, and then doing more research when your understanding likes on certain areas.
Yeah, I think if I think at the if I think of this through the my job lens, for example, through the professional lens, after you have been in an industry for a long time, in my
Hmm.
case, 20 years, you start to see a lot of patterns, and a lot of the job is pattern matching. So you
Hmm.
start to identify the certain scenarios very similar to something that you have experienced before. And so
Hmm.
you develop this instinct to see that sounds quite right or that doesn't sound right. And in both cases, actually, you learn to go one, two, or three steps deeper
Hmm.
because you learned that in the past this scenario that you thought was similar to another situation, then it was actually quite different in the detail, and so you gain this experience uh, that can help you drive also the future decisions. And
Hmm.
so I think there is pattern matching, there is a bit of instinct that you developed, which comes with not just time but also reflections about what happened.
Hmm.
And again, that's a good approach not to fall prey of whatever narrative is now being pushed by that guy on Twitter with 100,000 followers.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, you need to cross-reference your sources, get some of your experimentation, see what, yeah, just separate what's true or not. I wonder, like, how has it kind of, how has it influenced your experimentation with AI? Has it, giving you, just going deep, giving you some more context and maybe different ideas on how you could apply it? I'm curious, like, what did that bring to you, just going deeper?
I always have to live between two different worlds. One is the corporate world, and the other one the private experimentation. I think in the corporate world, you have very well defined guardrails, and
Hmm.
you need to go through those guardrails. Even to experiment, it becomes a process because you can't just
Yeah.
download a tool into the environment and start trying. Naturally, I think that's always the corporates are always a bit behind on technology because for very valid reasons,
Hmm.
but those reasons are there. I think as a private user, then you are really limited only by your time and your imagination, and
Hmm.
therefore you can experiment. And for sure, there is too much to experiment on AI because there are 150 new tools every 2 hours, and I
Yeah.
can't do it. So I need to also focus myself in the limited time that I have available. But yeah, I like to experiment. I like to understand where the technology is going. This helps me in my personal life and in my professional life because I have an idea of where things might go in the future.
Hmm.
And as a technologist, obviously that's part of the job. And I
Yeah.
think and it's also entertaining because I like technology. It's something that I always liked. I like to try new things. I like to be creative when possible. I like
Nice.
to write books, all the stuff. As you know, I like to talk to people. It's good.
Was there one experiment that you did that really surprised you on the results?
I have been trying, for example, now to stand up a website using not a website, but it's a complex explanation. But I want to basically create a PDF template, and I have a very clear picture in my mind of how this should look like. And
Hmm.
I've been trying to tinker with all the various AI tools to try and do it. And I think the best way of doing it is using code. So if you use ChatGPT or I think any other model, and you ask them to spit out the code, is much
Hmm.
more effective than using any of this design with AI type
Hmm.
of stuff that don't really work as precisely. So code is still more precise than any other prompt based design tool out there.
Hmm.
I don't know if that is a surprising outcome, but it's just an observation based on my bit of experimentation.
Yeah, I'm realizing the same because I know a lot of no-code tools have been on the scene, but also the vibe coding tools. But yeah, eventually it's just not as precise as understanding maybe the basic layers of the technology or the different libraries and things like that, and then actually just guiding the AI to, do very specifically and granularly what you need it to be done, right? Because otherwise you have to kind of argue with the like, no, don't do that, don't do it like that, and then it missed some pieces. So yeah, I'm also finding a very similar conclusion, um, which I think is great because lots of people probably going to, be better at coding and understanding what's going on in the background, and they're probably going to create some tools that are very way more specific to their situation rather than buy an off-the-shelf product and try to like mold it to their situation.
Yeah, I think it's also a big push to learn how to code. It's much more
Hmm.
immediate now to learn how to code. I studied computer engineering in uni 20 years ago, so I'm obviously very rusty now with the software development. But at least I have an idea, and the way I learned, I can see would be very very different from the way a person now would learn. If you have to start uni
Yeah.
this year would be a very different experience, and you would make so much progress so much faster, at least in the application side. Of course, all the theoretical side, theoretical knowledge that's required, especially if you want to do research or development of a certain extent. But to stand up
Hmm.
a website, anybody can do it. You don't need
Yeah.
any
Yeah.
any academic knowledge. Yes.
Very sure. Nice. Well, yeah, thanks for that. Really like, I mean, what I like about the conversation also, your perspective is really, separating being, uh, having a healthy dose of skepticism and also like taking the big picture and not trying to be so focused on, what's going on in a limited amount of time, but like, try to see above and have a high level view of what's going on, which is, I feel, and I think way more helpful to navigate uh, what's going on. So yeah, I really appreciate you jumping on the conversation.